Well, good afternoon, folks, and thank you for joining us here today on this beautiful early September day in the state of Maine. We had to move indoors today because of the weather. Um, so it's the week after Labor Day, and which is the traditional start of the campaign season here in Maine. And we're just 63 days away from Election Day. And I think it's as good a time as any for us to take stock of where we are in Maine's gubernatorial race, what the candidates have been saying, and what we can expect over the next couple of months. So far during this campaign, Governor Mills has been crisscrossing the state, demonstrating her strong leadership and talking about her amazing accomplishments, expanding Maine Care to 90,000 people, sending out $850 inflation relief checks, fully funding the state's share of education for the first time in history. Former Governor Paul LePage, on the other hand, has spent the last year since announcing his campaign smearing Governor Mills, lying about her record, and avoiding questions about his own record. But there's a good reason why Paul LePage avoids those questions. On some level, he knows that between his harmful policies, his divisive rhetoric, the constant partisan bickering that he encouraged when he was governor, that the 8 years of his time in office were a disaster for our state, frankly. And that's why much of his campaign so far has been focused on pushing the biggest lie of all, the idea that against all odds, somehow he's actually changed. That sometime during his extended vacation down in Florida, he had an epiphany that he's no longer the same man whose disastrous policy ideas and unhinged temperament plunged our case into chaos for 8 long years. So today I'm joined by my friends and colleagues, Representative Rebecca Millett, Representative Lois Reckitt, and Representative Mike Brennan. We were all present during the LePage years. We saw up close and personal and how his policy ideas failed, and his rage would get channeled at anyone and everyone that he disagreed with. More than a few times, we were even the targets of that rage, and we'll talk about that a little bit. And we have a clear message to deliver that the man who is now running for governor is the same old Paul LePage. He hasn't changed, and he never will. So without further ado, I'm going to first turn over the microphone to my friend, Representative Rebecca Millett. Rebecca.
Thanks, Drew. It is no secret that Paul LePage was a difficult governor to work with. Rather than working with the legislature to get stuff done to improve Mainers' lives, he instead usually worked against us, blocking our priorities and refusing to compromise. A good example of this was his use of the veto pen. LePage didn't just set the record for issuing vetoes, he blew it out of the water. By the end of his time in office, he had vetoed more bills than all the governors of the previous 100 years combined. I could stand here all day talking about different bills that he vetoed and how they would have improved the lives of countless people across the state. We don't quite have time for that, so I will tell the story of just one. In 2017, when I was in the state Senate, I proposed a bill to strengthen the testing requirements for the drinking water in Maine schools. I believed then, and I still do today, that all families deserve to know that the drinking water at their children's schools is safe. And the government has a responsibility to ensure that the standards for ensuring that safety are strong everywhere across the state. LePage saw it differently. Despite the fact that the bill passed overwhelmingly with bipartisan support, he said that it was unnecessary, vetoed it, and rallied just enough of his Republican colleagues to sustain his veto. Now, let me remind you, this was not some controversial partisan issue. This was simply an effort to ensure that families across the state could be sure that their children were not being poisoned with lead. Yet, like so many other common sense bills that would have made life better for Mainers, LePage went out of his way to veto it and stop it from becoming law. This year, while running to take back his old job, LePage has insisted that he's changed, and I'm not so sure. Just last month, at a campaign event behind closed doors, LePage was caught saying that he is once again gearing up to fight against the legislature and talking almost gleefully about the types of bills he plans to veto. That sounds a whole lot like the same old LePage to me. Since Governor Mills took over, I have seen how great our legislature and our government can be in the right hands. With her leadership, we've been able to pass law after law, which has improved Mainers' lives, including a version of that 2017 bill LePage vetoed to finally ensure the drinking water of every Maine public school student is safe. We can't go back to a governor who vetoes all sorts of much-needed progress just because he can. I'm going to turn it over to Representative Reckitt.
As you know, I believe I'm Lois Reckitt from the ocean end of South Portland, which is merging into the whole of Portland today in this rain. As also all reports have recently shown, women's reproductive rights, including access to abortion, is topmost in the mind of many Maine women. And yet former Governor LePage has repeatedly stated it is not an important issue for Maine. And in the words of many, many women, no matter what their personal beliefs, that's poppycock. Reproductive rights are important. Former Governor LePage will not rule out signing restrictions in Maine into law should they reach his desk. I believe he will not hesitate if given the chance. His campaigning with politicians from other states who push abortion restrictions, including Governors DeSantis and Youngkin, shows he hasn't changed one whit. In his previous 8 years as governor, where I was unfortunate or fortunate enough to serve one term, he was dismissive and oftentimes abusive in his words. Worse was his policies, which did not recognize women, families, and communities that needed support. His anti-government policies made it harder for women and families to be respected and supported to thrive in our economy. Governor Mills, Maine's first female governor, respects people and the law. Much of her administrative work, which has been overshadowed by the pandemic, unfortunately, was to restore state policies and practices that protect women, family, and communities. LePage hasn't changed, and likely he never will. He won't hesitate to turn back the clocks in Maine, and most especially in this dangerous Dobbs post-Roe era. He will gut the right to safe and legal abortion in Maine every chance he gets. We can't let him have that chance. Thank you. I'll turn this over now to Representative Brennan.
Thank you, Lois. Good to see you. Good morning. Thank you for being here today. And I appreciate the comments that have been made by Representative Gatine, Representative Millette, and Representative Reckitt. I want to talk about two major issues: revenue sharing and education funding. I was a mayor of Portland from 2011 to 2015 for 4 years. And each one of those 4 years, Paul LePage was relentless as the governor of Maine in trying to abolish the revenue sharing program. The revenue sharing program is key to local municipalities in terms of reducing property tax. And what we witnessed during his time as governor is one of the biggest shifts in taxes in the state of Maine, from income tax to local property taxes. Every municipal official, every school official, every staff person, every municipal councilor should be terrified about potentially looking at another 4 years of Paul LePage as governor, because we will see again an effort to eliminate the revenue sharing program and make a shift to eliminating income taxes. Why is the revenue sharing program important? Because it's a key element of where the state of Maine uses its revenue to distribute to local municipalities so they can address key issues in the community: public safety, roads, bridges, and as the essentials that make every municipality work in this state. So that's number one. There's no doubt in my mind that if Paul LePage is elected governor, revenue sharing will be one of the first things that will be slated for cuts. Governor Mills, along with the legislature, last year restored full funding for revenue sharing at 5%. And that has tremendously benefited municipalities across the state of Maine, the state of Maine. And just for example, in the city of Portland, in 1 year, we lost $2 million in revenue sharing. This year, we received over a $2 million increase. So that's significant. Second, regardless of what Paul LePage and his campaign tells you, they never came close to funding schools in this state at 55%. Never came close. Governor Mills last year, with the help of the legislature, for the first time in the state's history, got 55% school funding. That's not only critical because it addresses property tax issues, but it also gave us the resources that we're going to need to address COVID-19 issues and moving forward to make sure that we have a strong public school system in the state of Maine over the next 5 or 10 years. So Governor Mills got us to 55%, not Governor LePage. And in fact, another major item that Governor LePage shifted to local property taxes was teacher retirement. And local communities had to pick up half the cost of teacher retirement when the state before that had been fully paying for that cost. In addition to 55%, we became one of the first states in the country to fully fund breakfast and lunch programs for all students in the state of Maine. Every one of you here knows students learn best when they come to school with full nutrition and having full access to breakfast and lunch. And Maine has struggled for the last decade with food insecurity issues. You write newspaper articles, you have TV stories repeatedly about the increase of food insecurity in the state of Maine. This was a major step forward to address that issue. My aunt was Maine Teacher of the Year. She taught for 45 years, primarily in the Portland school system. Her first salary that she got as a teacher, she had to live at home with her mother because she couldn't afford to live on her own. Governor Mills increased the basic teacher salary to $40,000 in the state of Maine. That's still not enough, but it was a significant step from where we had been to where we are now. That will help us to retain teachers and also to encourage teachers and other school personnel to come into the system. What did Paul LePage do for teachers? He was critical, dismissive, and did everything he could to criticize teachers and criticize the profession. Lastly, we were on the cusp of losing a whole generation of high school graduates in the state of Maine to not going on to higher education, particularly young rural Mainers. Governor Mills included in her last budget $20 million, again, for the first time in the state's history, free tuition to community colleges. What did Paul LePage do to reduce or increase the affordability of higher education in Maine? Not sure. You'd have to ask him because I can't point to any examples of anything that I saw him do over the 8 years he was governor. So across the board, the voters of Maine have a clear choice. Somebody that supports revenue sharing, local government, and the ability to address property tax issues at the local level. Somebody who has been unquestioned in her support of public education in the state. And lastly, somebody who has given a next generation of Mainers the opportunity to go to college for free. So thank you very much. And again, I can't tell you how important this election is and the critical issues that are before the state of Maine this November. And I'll turn it back over to Drew.
Thank you, Representative Millette, Representative Reckitt, and Representative Brennan for sharing those experiences. It's really important that we never forget these things. They seem like a long time ago, but they really, they really weren't. So, before we break, before we end, I just want to again remind folks of that I also had some my own experiences with Governor LePage. And also want to share with you what I've seen him doing in the campaign so far this year. As many of you probably saw just last week, the Maine Democratic Party put out a video where I had the opportunity to tell the story in my own words about how 6 years ago, Governor LePage, just out of the blue, left me a threatening and frankly profanity-laden voicemail. And then subsequently made some bizarre comments to reporters challenging me to a duel. Saying he would like to point the gun right between my eyes. Again, I don't need to go into all the details of that story, but again, it's clear to me that this was not a man. It was clear to me then who was focused on or even capable of governing in a way that would help our state. I wish I could say that this was an isolated occurrence during the LePage administration. But these things happened with some frequency, and it really impacted the ability of the legislature to function and work together, and obviously our ability to work together with the chief executive. So 6 years later, a lot has changed in this state, but it's clear to me that Paul LePage has not changed. He still doesn't tell the truth. He still advocates for failed, harmful policies. He still makes violent threats, in spite of this narrative about how he's changed. Just a few weeks ago, he told one of our party staffers that he was going to deck him, right in front of a camera. So we just want to make sure that voters know that despite what Paul LePage may be saying on the campaign trail, what he thinks is convenient for him to say, he is still the same old Paul LePage. So this week we are launching a website to remind people about who he is. It's called sameoldlepage.com. And starting this Thursday, September 8th, it's going to be filled with details on how Paul LePage is the same man that he always was. Maine voters are smart. They have long memories. I think we all do. And we remember what our state was like when Paul LePage was governor and how much better things have gotten since he's left. And we are not going to allow our state to go back. So thank you. Happy to take some questions. I'm sure the legislators who spoke today would